Hello and welcome to episode 216 of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and this is a special listener's choice where I was realizing that the single question that I get asked the most when I am traveling for recitals or for teaching stuff for residencies, it's the vast majority of the questions I get are about Sam and what it was like to study with Sam Pilafian, what it was like to grow up with Sam Pilafian, what it was like to see him perform in so many different settings. And so I thought that I would put together a listener's choice here, and I posted got some great questions from people on Facebook and on Instagram. And I don't think I'm going to have time to get to all of them because there was like a flood of questions, but got some really, really good ones. So I think that you're going to really enjoy this episode. I know I'm going to enjoy the ability to celebrate Sam a little bit. I wanted to start by thanking everyone for your patience this summer. For, I believe it was 8 years, the Brass Junkies came out every other week with like religiously. I mean, there was one episode in those 8 years that was 1 day late, but it didn't even like skip. I mean, it's just like there was just 13 days between that one and the one after that. And then this spring, my father passed away, and everything just kind of has been a little bit chaotic. And the spring is the time when we would, historically, we would always get ahead, get a bunch of ones in the can, and that obviously did not happen because Gestures broadly had different plans. And so it's just been kind of a scramble. So there was one episode in June, and there is one episode in July. There may only be one in August, we'll see, but I'm looking forward to getting back to the every other week schedule in the fall whenever I am able to do that. But just be warned that that is coming, and so I just wanted to thank all of you for your patience very much. I also wanted to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba Mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right. Thank you to everybody who responded to my posts about this episode and with questions. Like I said, there's some really good ones, and let's get right to it. Okay. This one was from Matt Stock, which was via Instagram, if I remember correctly. Matt wrote, I've heard one of his students, maybe it was you, talk about how Sam had him use mental practice / visualization to prepare for an audition. It was more detailed than I've heard other people describe. Would you be able to say more about that? Yes. I'm not positive, Matt, that it was me that talked about this, but I know that I have on some, at least at some point in the past I have, and I'm happy to elaborate on it again. When I was in graduate school with Sam, he was very big into a visualization. And when I was preparing for auditions, whether it be for some professional auditions or for summer festival auditions, he not only had me, put together the list, and I had to go to Kinko's and get that like bound so that each list was like its own book. I then, in the process of preparing all of that music, when it was getting closer to the audition, I wouldn't say that he told me to wait like until right before the audition, but when it was getting closer to the audition, I started doing a lot of mental practicing of visualization, and how he would have me do that. And actually, I'm gonna kind of like update things now because I am positive. I'm going to boldly speak for Sam here, but I'm sure, this technology very much existed when he was still teaching, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he had told students to do this already. But back then, of course, you couldn't Google image search like every single space. Now you could find out ahead of time where an audition is going to be held, what the space looks like. You can look at the inside, at the actual hall that you're going to be in, right? So he would have me try to figure out what the place looked like, and sometimes it was like maybe just even a picture of the outside. Now I'm quite sure that he would have a student do like an in-depth look inside of the hall or of a rehearsal room, etc. Because you can find, sometimes it's instant, sometimes you got to look for 5 minutes, but you can find photos of any of that. And anyway, knowing exactly what the space is going to look like. if you've never taken a screened audition, it's really strange the first time that you do, because you walk out onto a stage, and it's usually if it's a stage and it's a big hall, sometimes it's a rehearsal room, but you're then just staring at, like, the back of whiteboards, and you don't see anything. It's just very weird. And then someone speaks to you in a kind of stern voice. They're not trying to be stern, but they're just very, okay, because they have to say the exact same thing in the same way to each candidate. And it is a lot less strange if you have already pictured yourself doing it. So he would have me picture the space and to walk in, and he would even have me picture, like, sitting there for just a little bit longer than is comfortable, like of silence, where you start to wonder, like, am I supposed to be doing something? Well, the answer is that if you're supposed to be doing something, they will say, actually, you can begin whenever you'd like. That's a lot better than starting to play before they are ready. Is not going to win you any fans on the other side of that partition. He would have me picture what I was going to be wearing. He would picture. He would have me picture, some audition proctor, like, opening the door for me, walking in with the two tubas. He would even have me picture emptying my spit ahead of time, so that was something that was just like, that was already done, and not something that the first sounds that the audition committee heard was me going like through a horn. He then would take it a step further. He would have me imagine that the hall was really cold. And now, how often are auditions really cold? Not that often. But if you picture that it's really cold, and that you kind of heat up, blow through some air through the horn, and then just still focus on what I'm trying to sound like, then he had me picture the hall being really, really hot. And so I'm just like dripping with sweat. But then he had me, I need to make sure that I actually connect these dots, because he did. Like, have it be really cold, and then have me go through my entire list with the room 10 degrees colder than I would choose to have it, and nailing the crap out of the list. And then drenched in sweat. So, like, my back of my shirt is sticking to my back before I even take a single breath. And then I nail the crap out of the list. Having them, like, I play the first excerpt, and then just like wait, and there's like no feedback, right? And it's like, and they don't even say right away. That just all of these different things that can get inside of your head. He would have me picture. Sometimes it's not screened. If you're playing a jury, this works for this as well, where there might be five of us out there, and we are not going to be smiling. We're not going to be scowling at you, but we're not going to be smiling. We're there for hours. And, if I am frantically writing stuff for the student before you, because it's not just, comments, but it's also comments that are going to be read by the student when I'm nowhere around. So it can't just say bad intonation. I mean, it can. It's much more helpful to say, be aware that on an ascending, interval of larger than a fourth, that the top note happens to be sharp, right? Something like that, right? Is a lot more useful in terms of in terms of moving forward for the students than just like bad intonation, right? So I have to write that in a way that the student is going to be able to learn from it without any context other than my words. And so I may very well be frantically, so you could be one of my students, and I still try to do this, but I might not look up and welcome you into the room because I'm still doing the job of the one before. You picture that the first time that happens, it's kind of awkward, because I've never had a single student that I don't say hello to them when they walk in the room, right? But then in a jury or in an audition, everything is different. Point is that he would have us picture every single possible scenario, and so that we didn't get thrown. And there's actually a lot of science behind the fact that if you visualize that you have done things, that you can actually trick your brain into thinking that you have actually experienced it, and that if you do it enough, and that if you do it well enough, that the brain can sometimes not be able to tell the difference between an experience that you've actually had and an experience that your brain thinks that you've had. And so the answer, the question is, how do I get better at auditions? And the simplest answer is, take more auditions. But that's kind of an annoying answer. That's kind of like, Nicholas, my son, wants to watch some movies that are not quite appropriate for him yet. And if the question is, how can it become appropriate for me? It's like, get older. It's like, that's not really a helpful thing for a 9-year-old to to hear. But in this audition sense, you can trick your brain into thinking that you have nailed the crap out of your hardest excerpts. That's the other thing. Put the excerpts in like a really, really unpleasant order, right? Fountains and then Beadlow. I just like huge, and then real, small and high and and vulnerable, etc. And you can do that, and then in general, orchestra committees or any committees are not putting the lists in like the worst possible order, right? They actually want people to do well. And in general, that's not the way to actually get people to do their best. So, yeah, great question, Matt. Sam was really big into visualization. So, yeah. All right, next question. I don't know if you just heard my air conditioning kick on, but the heat index, it's down. It's like it's over 100. So I'm not going to ask my family to sit in the DC heat for an hour without any air conditioning on. That would not be kind. So anyway, okay. Next up, Jeff Johns. What is your favorite or top few unexpected story from Sam over the course of your 3-part TEM episode or interviews with Sam? Stories you hadn't heard before the interviews. The first thing, which I commented to Jeff, I think it was on Facebook, is that I have actually not been able to bring myself to listen to either TBJ100, Sam's episode there, or to any of his TEM appearances, which I will link to in the show notes. And it's been over 4 years, so I probably should just kind of do that. I just haven't quite been ready to, especially the Brass Junkies one where he's talking about how much hope he has for this new treatment, etc., which obviously did not work. And there's something very comforting about the fact that all of that is there for me when I'm ready for it. I just haven't quite managed the courage to be able to go there yet. So long-winded, which is my specialty, way of saying that I have not listened to those TEM interviews in like years. But I do know one thing that jumped out at me was the stuff with Pink Floyd. A lot of people know that Sam was in the orchestra for The Wall. For like one of the most famous rock albums of all time. You could maybe make an argument the most famous rock album. I mean, it's certainly on the shortest list possible. Well, he played on the I won't even try and paraphrase this story because you should just hear it. But it was incredible. Like they were talking about this like space that they had for a long time, like in New York City, and like he went in like super late and did a whole bunch of like really creative things that didn't even make the album. But it was just like this behind the scenes look into the creative process of Pink Floyd, recording The Wall, and yeah, that really blew my mind. But then also hearing about Empire when they were kids, like going into Columbia Records and for looking for a recording contract. That was also really eye-opening because I just hadn't heard those stories before, which is why I'm so glad. And there was never a third part of the TEM. There was never an official third part. I did do one that was on producing, which if you have ever have any aspirations for producing a recording session, I beg you to listen to that TEM interview with Sam Pilafian on producing. I texted him because I was producing a recording session for Monumental Brass, and that was going to be my first time ever producing. And I said, "What advice do you have?" And he wrote back like the famous "call you in 5." And I was like, "All right, the phone call is happening." So he then called me 5 minutes later, and he said grab a paper and a pen, and I was like, I'm already on it. So I was actually just on my computer. but I was ready. And then it was like 10 minutes rapid fire where he was talking about how, yes, your ears are really important, but you're actually like the managing of the humans in there, no matter how strong the players are, that it's all recording sessions are all about momentum, both chop wise, music, artistically, but also just like on a human level. And it was gold. And so I read and riffed off of those notes that I took because I was just like, I was writing it all down. So there was supposed to be a third part to his TEM interview, which was talking about like travel and light and everything. And, you know, yeah, get stuff like that done when you have the chance, because suddenly he got real sick and it wasn't really appropriate to be asking him to do it then. And then he like got better, and then I was going to ask him, and then it just like, yeah, it just didn't work out. So it was not meant to be, but I'm really glad that we got those first couple in-depth conversations with Sam about his career trajectory. So thank you, Jeff, for that. All right. Mark Dundor. I swear this is not a plant. I swear that Mark posted this without me being like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you post this? The question was, what inspirations did you and Sam take from the music of Phish over the years? And the reason that that I'm going to answer this question, other than the fact that I enjoy talking about Phish more than I enjoy talking about anything else, but no, it's that it applies the two things that struck me about excuse me, about Sam's reaction and takeaways from the music of Phish, which he went to I don't know, 5 or 6 shows, and only half of those were with me. He went on his own more than once, which was really cool. But I of course took him to his first. There's two things that he really talked about, which was the stage presence and the musical storytelling. First, I'll tell you the story about the first time, the first show that I took him to, which was back in 1994. I was in my sophomore year at Northwestern. This is December of '94, and I flew down to Arizona with the explicit purpose of taking Sam to see Phish, because I just thought that he was going to lose his mind. And sure enough, they come out. He was like very lovingly making fun of me. He drove me and Chuck Kerrigan and like 4 other ASU students. We all piled into his minivan and drove out to the Mesa Amphitheater, and we pulling in and saw the tour bus. He was like, Hitz, there's a tour bus. Do you think they're around? He was like totally making fun of me, which was hilarious. We then get into the show, and they open. I will put a link to the tune, because the recording of the show is around and available. But they open with a tune called Llama, and about a little over 2 minutes into that, the drummer. This is a very fast-paced, like hard driving, and it's the beginning of the solo was a very short guitar solo. Trey was playing like this digital noise. It was really tweaked and intense, and then it came out with a flourish. It came out into melodic soloing, and then blazed to a very quick peak, and then they were out and then on with the rest of the show. And during this short and frantic guitar solo, the drummer played a measure fill of quarter note triplets, and when he did that, and that coincided with the guitarist like exploding into the downbeat, and Sam, I was, of course, I had one eye on the band, but I had one eye on like my mentor. Like my musical mentor is like seeing my favorite band ever, and he was not looking at me. He was not doing this for effect. He with double fist pumped, and he screamed, "Fuck yeah!" And he was like screaming at the band, and that was the single most affirming moment of my entire life. And he then, the band had him leaving. Sorry, I got to throw an explicit tag on the beginning of this so that I don't forget. The band had him eating out of the palm of their collective hands for the entire rest of the night. Like, he was all in a way that was very similar to what Empire did. It was very, very similar to what Empire did. Where the other thing that I think was remarkable to Sam was that, and it was remarkable to me for my first show, was that when they walked out, especially back then, they look a lot different now. But they looked in 1994, this band looked like they had just come off of like an all-night Dungeons and Dragons tournament, and that they were like just seeing the sunlight for the first time at like at 7 a.m. And I mean, they just were like overgrown, shaggy. They were just like, if you saw these guys and somebody was like, "Hey, those four over there in that booth, they're rock stars," you'd be like, "Sure, yeah." And I'm a model. Yeah, it's like not happening. And then they just plugged in and then just launched like with no rock and roll. I saw ECDC with like cannons and explosions. It was amazing. Fish just walk out and they're like, "Hey," and then they just poof, and then exploded, and that really blew his mind. And he talked a lot about their musical storytelling, about how much conviction they played with. Sam was who taught me, that there's I heard this over and over again from Sam and from Rex Martin about how there are two punctuation marks you can play any note or any phrase with. One is a question mark, and the other is an exclamation point. And Fish was like screaming exclamation points, and that was something that he commented on, was just their conviction in their musical storytelling, whether it was an improv or whether it was how they approached composed stuff. All of it was just, there was a screaming exclamation points. And he talked about how the drummer in particular, about how John Fishman, about how his stage presence. He did a parody song. He did Neil Diamond's "Cracklin' Rosie" that night, which he came up and sang. It was complete with crash cymbals, and it was typical Fish hijinks. But Fishman had the crowd eaten out of the palm of his hand, and that was I think the main takeaway from Sam as we were walking away. He was like, that drummer, man. He was like, that guy gets showbiz, and he's also a beast, but he gets the showbiz part of it. So I would say that those were the two main takeaways for Sam, was like the stage presence, as well as the conviction in their musical storytelling. Great question. I need more questions about Fish. No, everybody's like, okay, that was like not actually that much about Fish. It was more about chamber music and about how it applied, but they're like, but please stop talking about them. Okay. Let's see here. The next two questions, I got both of them, and they were, I grouped them because they're basically the same question, but they were worded in a different ways, and so I wanted to include them both. The first was from Cassidy Stanhope. What is the most valuable life lesson, outside of music that you learned from Sam? And then Nikki Barron said, what lessons did Sam teach you about life along the way? Maybe through teaching you music, or maybe just by being around him. There are plenty of great teachers of brass technique, but the way Sam interacted with people is what made him, in my opinion, a legend. So, thank you, Cassidy and Nikki. I think that, there's so many directions that I could go with here, but what I came up with when I was planning my thoughts for this listener's choice was his ability to make people feel like they mattered by really truly listening to them. He was such a good listener, and I talked about this while fighting back tears at his celebration of life. That he was, when I first met him. I was 12 years old, and I thought I wanted to do this, for a living. And I had decided when I was 11 that I was going to become a professional tuba player. And when I met him after an Empire Brass concert at Tanglewood, there's a photo that I know I've said all this on the podcast before, but this will be new for some people. There's an actual photo from 1988 that my mother snapped of me about to talk to Sam. He is like talking to the person, some other person. He's kind of aimed to his left and I'm to his right, and I'm just sitting there, like, you can see it's from behind, and my shoulders are just like slouched. I'm just like, you can't see my face, but you can tell that I'm just in absolute awe It might be from the the robin egg blue pants that he was rocking, but it was more just the presence of this guy who was like this. And I grew up listening to Chester Schmitz and the Boston Symphony. I mean, I'd heard amazing tuba, but I'd heard a lot of it as a kid. I was very spoiled. But what Sam did in a brass quintet, like I had never seen that before, and so I had just had my brain rewired by this guy, and I'm now standing. It was as if I was standing that close to Jim Rice. That's what it felt like to me. And of course, I had never been that close to Jim Rice, and then I was just like, I was about to talk to him. When I did, the way that I put this at the Celebration of Life was that I did not leave that conversation, which was, I don't know if it was 2 minutes long. It wasn't 20 seconds. It might have been 2 minutes. It might have been 5 minutes. Felt like it was like 45 minutes. I'm sure it wasn't. But I left that conversation with Sam not thinking that I could do what he did for a living. I was positive that I could do what he did for a living. I was positive that I could be in a brass quintet that toured all over the world and made a living and played music like that. And that was because he leaned down, he got like way down so that we were eye to eye, and he was asking me questions about, all I wanted was him to talk about himself. And he was asking me, and he was talking to me about the tuba, and he was like asking what kind of tuba I played and like where I was from. And he was like, oh yeah, Sudbury, yeah, and he was just like, he made it feel like I was speaking to an equal, and he made it just so approachable to me that it wasn't like, oh wow, this guy who is completely different than me and out of my league as a human. And that's what, especially at that age, that's what people who are the best in the world at their craft can feel like. Like, he was really kind to kind of let me talk to him. He left like, yeah, no, Andrew, you and I are the same. We're just at different points in our journey. You're 12, and it's actually crazy to think now. I was doing this math the other day that he is, he was almost 2 years younger than I am right now, which is like, oh, yeah, that whole time marches on thing. But he really listened to me, and it was the making people feel like they matter by truly listening, and then making you believe that you could do anything when you set your mind to it. And I saw him coach some players who were not good that left with that feeling. I saw him coach players that were by far the best player in the entire class in the room, who left with that feeling, and everything in between. People with too much confidence, with not enough confidence, outgoing, introverted, all of the above. That was really, really a gift. And so that goes for teaching, but that also just goes for being a human. And I sometimes consciously and other times subconsciously, I never forgot that first encounter with Sam, because in general, you don't announce to somebody. Now, if it's Jim Rice, then sure. But if you don't know who Jim Rice is, he's a Hall of Fame player for the Red Sox from my childhood, who was still active on the Red Sox when I was that age. Although he was just about to retire in 1988. But anyway, I digress. In general, when somebody you look up to, you don't say, "You're my hero." You just kind of start talking to them. And I'm not under any delusions that in my 14 years of Boston Brass that I kept meeting people that I was their hero. But there were a lot of tuba players who would come up to me afterwards, people, whatever, who sometimes didn't even identify as tuba players. Put it this way, 14 years on the road, I promise you, there were a few days of the thousands of concerts and master classes. There was a few times when I did not feel like talking to anybody afterwards, right? Like, I'm just, because real life was happening, or we were 2 weeks into a tour, or we were 2 days into a tour and I was feeling run down already and there was 2 weeks left, or we, whatever, long list of reasons why, right? I always remembered that encounter with Sam, and I always tried to and I think I did a really good job of this, if I may be frank about it. of like being real present with people when they came up to tell me how much the performance that I had just given meant to them, and the fact that we were there, etc. So yeah, that's kind of the, and I could give you like 19 more answers for life lessons that he taught me, but I thought that those were the ones that really kind of jumped out at me when I read your question. So thank you, Cassidy and Nikki. All right, the next one is not a question. It is a spot for the Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne University. Guess what? Jim Nova is no longer the head of Brass. It was a part. We're not allowed to talk about it. It was a part of a lawsuit. I'm just kidding. Had nothing to do with the lawsuit. Christopher Wilson, who is a monster trumpet player. He's been a principal of the Pittsburgh Opera for something like 6 years, something like that. But he's the new head of the brass area at Duquesne. And what's his face? I've already forgotten his name. Jim Nova, that's it. He's still there. But anyway, the brass faculty is absolutely incredible. If you are a young brass player and would like to learn more about a school that has killer teachers, a great culture, and is in a city that does not get enough credit for being as hip as it is as an artistic and a musical place. There's like straightforward stuff. There's like weird stuff, like, which I say as a compliment. There's just like really, really interesting, innovative art that's being made in Pittsburgh, as well as having a world-class opera, as well as having a world-class symphony. Yeah, check it out. There is a link in the show notes for a video for Brass Junkies listeners. And yeah, thank you very much to the Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne University and Chris Wilson and all of the rest of the incredible brass faculty there. All right, let's get back to the questions here. Peter Green, who was at ASU when I was there. What's up, Peter? He asked, how did Sam make the time to be a world-class player, arranger, teacher, and somehow still make each student feel like he was fully devoted to their success? This is a very similar question or answer to that last, that last question, which is the, but it's just like a slightly different answer, which is why I also included it. Sam had this amazing ability to be, what's the phrase? Like, be where your feet are is really good advice for me in general. Where if I'm teaching a lesson and I'm thinking about like, oh crap, I've got a really big credit card bill this month and I have to remember to transfer that, right? That's not being where my feet are, right? My feet are this student right here, right now, playing this. And even if this is a student of mine who's been studying with me for weekly for 5 years, and we have had like 200 plus lessons, we've never had this lesson right here, right now. And I think that was the way that Sam was able to spread himself so thin while also making, as Peter described it, each student feel like he was fully devoted to their success, was that he was always present. The teachers that I, all of the teachers I know that had the ability to just be teaching or just coaching or just whatever, had that ability to shut out the rest of their life, to enable and empower a student to shut out the rest of their life, especially when there was hardship involved, and to just be present. And when you're able to be present and you're not worried about like checking all the boxes, like food, shelter, all that, but also just emotional, like I think my girlfriend's about to dump me. You're right there. You're right there. That's when progress, that's when learning can happen, because you can allow yourself to be vulnerable. And he was really, really good at that. And because he was present with students, like, what the hell else are you going to be like, leaning in on other than their success? Right? The teachers who, I don't know any teachers who like don't want their students to succeed, but the ones who aren't as good at keeping that, forward facing, I think are also the ones that are not good at like being where their feet are when they are teaching or coaching. So that was my take on that one. Mark Frost, whose nickname is Frosty the Bone Man. He is where is he from? From France? From no, he's from England. Mark Frost. Andrew, I'd love to know what Sam said to you guys about asking me to be a part of the Kenton Christmas CD. A complete stranger being asked to do a pretty spectacular recording. So, yeah, we recorded the Kenton Christmas carols, and Sam was the conductor. That was one of the highlights of my career. I was the tuba, the way that things set up sonically, I was actually, my stand was here, and Sam's conducting stand was here. I mean, it was like this. I was sitting right in front of him for that entire recording session. Like he was literally 3 feet away from me, which was talk about pressure. He's like the greatest brass quintet tuba player of all time. Is sitting. And if you think it's somebody else, don't email me. It's email somebody else. Yeah, like right in front of me. So which was really amazing. But when we were putting together the list of people that we were going to fill out that ensemble with, Sam, he didn't do this a lot. So when he did, it was like, okay, we're done. Like Sam was like, you're calling Mark Frost. Is this dude from England? Like, just trust me. Pay whatever it's going to take to get him there. Obviously, it's like, he's like, hey, New York City's not that far away. Can we find somebody to drive there? Sam was like, you're going to pay to bring this guy in from out of the country. You will thank me later. Next. And that was it. It was just like it was a slam dunk case. He did not take any questions. So, and we are very happy that he did, because Mark, you're an absolute freak of nature on the bass trombone, and I can't imagine that recording without you on it. So thank you to Sam for insisting, for pulling the power move there, and getting us to fork over the extra cash for Mark's plane ticket. Okay, Nelson Penserga, formerly my neighbor here in Northern Virginia, who moved to, I believe, Minnesota, but a band director. How would Sam approach teaching younger, meaning middle school and high school, middle being college age, and older being professional students? Similarities and differences. Great question. Which obviously would be weird if it was a bad question. Then I was like, but I'm going to include it on the episode. That'd be strange. So I guess that's kind of that's verbal graffiti, as they say, in like people that teach this stuff for a living. It's like, well, yeah, we know it's a great question. Just answer it. I would say that that there were more similarities than I think that the differences were the standards that he would encourage people to hold themselves to. Although even there was similarities, because he would ask each of those ability levels to hold themselves to a high standard for them, right? And so that's actually, I guess you could say, more similarities than differences. But if I had to paint with a really broad brush, and Sam was so good at teaching the student in front of him. And I've been so spoiled by the teachers that I have been able to study with in my life. Rex Martin is another just textbook example of someone. He and Sam both just taught the student in front of them, and they did not. To each their own, but I have a fundamental problem with people that teach all freshmen the exact same way. They all need to be on the same equipment, and they all start with the same thing in the same way. Like, I just don't understand that. I understand it's a hell of a lot easier for the teacher, but I do not understand that approach. And both of my main college, and Sam obviously predates college for me, but both of my main teachers were both just great examples of that. So within the context, with the caveat that Sam was really good at teaching the student in front of him, if I had to paint with a broad brush, I would say that the two things that he would focus on with everybody were ear and air. And those were the two things. Talked a lot about hearing what you were trying to sound like. He was really big on listening to music. I remember, and I wish I could tell you what it was. I did then, and I still do now. I love pop music. I really love pop music. But really bad pop music. But there's some pop music that's just like kind of made in a factory. And I don't remember what it was. It was some tune in 1994. I was driving Sam in I was about to say in my minivan, and my parents would be like, "That's interesting. When did you get a minivan?" It was my parents' minivan, and I was giving him a ride around Tanglewood, and some tune came on the radio, and I was like, "Oh, I was like, I cannot stand this tune." And then I explained why, and Sam laughed. He's like, Hitz, he's like, "You're nuts in a good way." He's like, "I love that you have a strong opinion about like all of the music that you hear." That he was really into listening to music, and not just classical and jazz, if we were playing classical and jazz, but rock, but fish, but bluegrass, heavy metal, free jazz, real esoteric stuff, which I'm going to talk about in just a couple of minutes here from another question. But the point is, he was really big at listening, and he would talk about like two different kinds of listening: to passive listening, which he advocated for, and intense listening, which he advocated for as well. And the passive listening was just like having your headphones on, walking from one dorm, to another to visit somebody, or going from one class to another. And then the intense listening was like sitting down with a score in the library or not in the library, and following along with the Chicago, Bernstein, Shostakovich, seven, recording, like with the score, looking at like at all of the, listening for articulations and note releases and all that, to be, how those were lining up, who was leading it, where it was coming from, etc. And then ear, just in terms of also, while you were playing, listening sideways, right? Like, he was so good at the times when I played with him in a Dixie band when I was in graduate school. There was a group called the Dixie Devils, which ended up actually getting rolled into ASU proper. It became like a school ensemble, but when I was in it, it was just like a standalone group. And Sam sat in with us a few times, and he my very first, here's a great Sam story, which I know I've told before, but I don't know if I've told it on the podcast. I was really nervous for my first Dixie gig. Those were the times that you like drop me in on some like some new music concert with like meter changes every other measure, when the entire rest of the orchestra has rehearsed and I'm sight reading on the concert. Let's go. Like, no hesitation. I'm ready to rock, like, right away. But to put, like, there's, like, no notes in front of me. There's, like, some chord changes, and it's, like, the ending, like, might have 3 extra bars of tonic, but it might also, like, circle back 3 chords and then repeat that 3 times, or it circles back and then just, like, that was, like, terrifying to me. Even though that first gig, there was, like, 5 people in this bar. Including us, it was 10. But anyway... he could tell I was really nervous, and he goes to count off. He was playing trombone, which he didn't do a lot of until then, and he could tell that I was nervous, and he he's counting off the tune, right? Like, we are about to start the gig, and he turns around, he looks right at me. So this is obviously not on mic, and he goes, "Hitz," he goes, "if you tell anybody that I was playing this thing in public, I'm gonna fucking kill you. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then just like this big rip, and then we were off and running." Like, and so like the moment before, I was really scared, and then like, and I like laughed, and then had to take in a breath while I was laughing, and then launched into the tune, which was like him being a great human, but it was also great pedagogy, because it was just like, you can what is the movie, like the beatings will continue until morale improves? Like, you could bark at me all you want, even lovingly bark at me, like, you need to just relax, there's only 5 people here. Or you can just like be like, all right, here's a joke, here's something that you're not supposed to say, especially after you've already started counting the tune in, and there's like layers there, and I'm laughing, and then I'm like, I'm going, and then And it was great. And then I was like, by like the second measure, I was like less nervous than the first measure, and I was 1/10 as nervous as I had been literally 3 seconds before he said, he turned around and cursed at me. So, but even in those Dixie gigs, when he was clearly by far the best player on the stage. And I once stayed at what hotel was it in New Orleans? I can't remember which one it was. Real famous hotel that was really nice. And when you're never gonna believe this, but Fish was in town in New Orleans in 1999, and I went there. Might have been the Pontchartrain Hotel. But I asked Sam. I said, hey, have you ever been to that? Because he was asking me how my trip was, and he was. And by the way, he like let me move my teaching obligations around and my lessons so that I could go see Fish New Orleans because he was awesome. And he asked me how the trip was, and I was like, have you ever been to that hotel? And he just smiled, and I was like, oh, it's a beautiful hotel. It's like, it's gorgeous, the lobby. I was like, have you ever been there? And he just got this like Sam smile, and he said. He said, "What?" He was like, "Yeah." He said, "I had a nightly gig there for 3 months once back in 1960, whatever." And I was like, "Of course." I'm like asking him if he'd ever been to a hotel, and he played like 100 nights in a row, because of course he did, right? Which was just very Sam. So anyway, so he, even though he was by far the best player on that stage, he was always listening, always listening for other people, for new ideas, for just something, because he was looking to have a conversation, even when he was Sam Pilafian, and then he wasn't, and then he was with, a bunch of college kids, some of which, like me, who were real good at a whole bunch of stuff, but not this, right? Like, and then he was still like listening to like try and interact with me rather than just modeling for me. He was modeling while also having a conversation. That's next level. That's next level playing and teaching. And then the air thing, air is, in fact, yeah, I do. I've got the update. Oh, look at this. I got the OG breathing gym, and then I've got the updated breathing gym. Pat sent me $20 for the plug. He would just he would talk about air all the time, right? And speaking of Pat, you can hear you hear Pat talk about you never hear Pat talk about accuracy. Same with Sam, and I've heard Pat really break it down where it's like if you got the ear and the air together, then then the accuracy comes along for the ride. And so I would say that the similarity between all of those, because younger players, what's the main thing that they have to do is play with the right quantity and the right quality of air. College age is like you got to make sure that you are, that you're blowing through phrases, that you're sustaining, the line, which on a tuba takes an awful lot of air. And then the older professional students, it's all about air. Everything's about air. So if you hear what you're trying to sound like, you can hear how you're interacting with others, and you've got the air, then like so much other stuff takes care of itself. So I would say that that's kind of how. So it's almost all similarities between how he taught all three of those levels. Nelson, that was an awesome question. Thank you very much. Okay, Andrew Spang. Would you discuss his caring and almost complete trust of people? When Doc Marcellus asked if I wanted to play contrabass trombone with the Eastman Trombone Choir, he suggested I call up Sam about borrowing an instrument. I did so out of nowhere, and with only my word, Sam said, sure. Oh, and I've got a new Minich in G that plays like a real instrument, not like those slide tanks in B flat or F. And immediately moved on to how to ship it to me. I was wondering if you had any stories left untold to share about Sam's giving nature. I'm not sure if I have any like stories that are necessarily untold. First of all, I just wanted to include that story from you, Andrew, which that's like so Sam. It's like because like Doc gave if you were the kind of person that he should not loan an instrument to, then Doc would not have said, here's Sam's number, right? Like, so he had already kind of vetted you through Doc, who he clearly trusted unconditionally. I will tell you that I had a situation obviously it was a few years ago because this involves Sam, and he's been gone for a while now. But I needed to get an F tuba quickly for a professional situation. Anyway, I called Sam in a panic, and there was I can't really get into the details, but there was a specific thing where I needed an F tuba, and I needed it quickly, and I wanted to buy a Bobo custom F. I'm super happy, by the way, with my XO brass from Jupiter. That C tube is awesome. They don't make an F tuba, and yeah, playing things that should be played on F tuba on C is you can call Pat Sheridan if you want someone to do that, but not me. So that's not my wheelhouse, and I can do it, but anyway. Yeah, I choose not to. Let's put it that way. And actually, it's been a few years since I've even tried. So, moving right along. And so I texted Sam, and I was like, Sam, I just tried to buy a Bobo, and they told me it's like a 9-month wait, and I'm like a little panicked. And Sam he texted and he said, call you in 5, and I was like, okay. And he then told me that he had a prototype of like the first, I think it was the 822, but I'm not sure about that. Don't email me. But no, the 822 is the Bobo. Anyway, he had a Yamaha F prototype, which played amazingly. And he was like, I am on the road until tomorrow. Tomorrow night, I can put this in the mail to you. And he's like, you pay me for shipping and you keep it until, so I paid $120 to borrow his F tuba for like 9 months, and I was covered for what I needed to be covered for. And I bought that, I put in an order for that Bobo, like that day. And yeah, so just typical Sam, but somehow, because, he and I were so close, that's a less cool story than you, Andrew, like who didn't know Sam from, who Sam didn't know you from anybody, and the fact that he was just like immediately, you're like 2 minutes into talking to him, and he's talking about how to ship it to you. That's so cool. Yeah, that's really great. All right, quick plug here for a course from Hitz Academy that is coming out this fall called Networking for Musicians. The music business has always been about who you know, but that's never been more the case than it is now. So much of the music business is like project based, and it's like everything is about who you know. I get, as a part of TEM coaching, I get asked over and over and over again, like how to get emails answered, because so many emails go unanswered when you pitch a concert series, or when you pitch somebody to be your management, or when you pitch somebody to collaborate with them, because anybody can contact anybody now, and so it's real easy to not get a response. So anyway, this course is all about how to make meaningful connections with people that are going to help you to not only make your art, but also to get it in front of the right people, and to help you to do everything that you want to do in the music business. If you go to brassjunkies.com/networking, I made a super short video, like 1-minute video, describing what the course has to offer, and there's a place to sign up to leave your email, which is not in any way committing to buy this thing. It's just so that I will let you know when it becomes available. As a part of the pre-sale, there's going to be a couple of extra bonuses that are included. One of them is going to be templates for pitching people. I have been pitched so many times by people looking for gigs, for people looking to be on podcasts, for people on the board of the Mockingbird Foundation, people looking for grant requests. And I have good news for all of you, is that literally 95% of all of the pitches in any of those areas are all horrible. And so if you can, so I'm actually including some templates, which you can just kind of plug in what you need to do. And the whole course is about how you can cut through the noise, and how you can show others how you're going to help them, and then they're more than happy to help you. So again, brassjunkies.com/networking to learn more. Okay, just a few more here. Ellen Guys Passiony. Ellen, hello, how are you? A longtime supporter of the Brass Junkies. Ellen wrote, I've heard you, Pat Sheridan, and Sam mention improvising. Can you pull out more info on how Sam approached improvisation? Like just for fun, question mark, as a teaching tool, question mark. So, yes, I can, Ellen. It'd be funny if I had included your question and then I wrote, nope, I can't. And then I went on to Tom Holtz's question. No, I can. So how he approached improvising, certainly how he approached teaching it. The one thing is that well, first let me tell a story, which is that when I was a student at Tanglewood in the summer of, I think it was my first summer there. I think it was 1990. It was my first summer there in 1990. So I was 14 for the beginning of the summer and then turned 15 partway through. Sam handed me a CD of the New York Trumpet Ensemble, which was 5 trumpet players, included Mark Gould and Chris Gecker and Marvin Stamm and a couple of others of fantastic players. Enough amazing players I can't even remember all of them. And then Mark Shane on piano and Sam on tuba. That was the whole disc. Was I think it was 7 people, 5 trumpets, piano, and tuba. First of all, I knew that he really thought highly of this recording because he was always bashing trumpets, and he was giving me a CD that had 5 trumpet players on it and only 7 musicians. But it was phenomenal. He handed me the CD, and he told me to read, excuse me, not to read, the opposite of reading. This is all by ear. He said, learn the tuba solo at the beginning of track 10, which was Buddy Bolden's Blues. And I was like, sweet. I was like, that's awesome. I said, what key is it in? And he said, learn the tuba solo at the beginning of Buddy Bolden's Blues, which is track 10. And I kind of smiled and I was like, cool, what note does it start on? And he said, learn the tuba solo at the beginning of Buddy. I was like, all right. I was like, I'm not going to get any more information out of you, am I? And then he gave me a look like, you're quick hits. I don't care what everyone else at this entire, at all at Tanglewood says, like you're quick. So I go back to the dorm, and it was a hot mess. I'd never done it before, right? But guess what? I could play that solo for you, like verbatim, right now. I could play it, which is amazing. That's how well I learned it. I'm not saying that's amazing because of my greatness. I want to be clear. I was like, yeah, isn't that amazing? No, the reason is because it was such an amazing assignment. Because that was 33. That was 33 years ago next week, is when he handed me that thing. And because I'd never done this, I had to listen to that thing so many times over and over and over and over and over again that I still remember it 33 years later. And I made mistake after mistake after mistake. And we didn't have the amazing slow down, or we didn't have the ability to slow things down while keeping it at pitch. This was just like start the track over, start the track over, start the track over, start the track over. But it involved listening. And so, Sam was like a big proponent on listening. He talked a lot about how, that we all have to listen to lots of the key to speaking Spanish is hearing lots of people speak Spanish. And if you don't listen to a lot of people speaking Spanish, then your accent is going to be terrible, right? My son just finished his 4th year of Spanish immersion, started in kindergarten, and he just went through 3rd grade. And half of his class was native Spanish speakers, and half of his class was native English speakers. Half of his day was in Spanish. All of his math was completely in Spanish. Half of his day was in English. And his accent, when you hear him speak Spanish or repeat a Spanish word, is killer, because he has been surrounded for like 500 plus school days at this point by kids who are native Spanish speakers speaking in their native language. So his ear for Spanish is amazing. That was one thing that I had going for me on that Dixie gig, where Sam turned around and cursed at me as he was counting off the tune, is that I had been to New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival a couple of times already. Like I had I had heard amazing Dixie music and heard a lot of it. I just never played it. And so my accent, if you will, for that was like way better than it should have been as a beginner. But he was always stressing that, like in terms of improv, is to listen. But he also gave me something he knew I was going to like, because that solo that he played at the beginning of that is just so good. It makes me smile every time I hear it, and he knew that I was going to be willing to do it over and over and over again. And so the other thing that he talked that I've heard him talk about as a teaching tool is the value, in particular for tuba players, the value of learning how to play bass lines, like even just really, really, really basic bass lines, and about how bass players, naturally start thinking in like 4 8 bar phrases, 16 bar phrases, and there's an arc to or 12 bar phrases, of course, are is a frequent number for forms, that you kind of I think in a more on a more I think it's easier. I think that Sam would agree with this. For the record, I'm just sharing like what I'm remembering him telling me and others. I'm not speaking for Sam, except for when there's like a direct quote, and then I'm saying that I'm not speaking for him. And there were a couple of questions that I didn't quite, I couldn't quite answer because I just didn't know. So I didn't, when they said, what did Sam say about, and if I just didn't have enough data, then I just skipped those questions, because I certainly don't want to be like, well, I'm sure that he would have said like, this is all stuff that I heard him actually say to me or to other people in front of me. But he talked about how if you could get just like the magic of getting just your average high school tuba player. This is not a kid that's making all state. This is just like, maybe a kid that's like maybe makes districts junior, senior year, maybe not. Just like your average high school tuba player, who, if you can get them improvising bass lines like this much, just a little bit much, about how you then plug them in to marching band, and about how they start playing in like 4 8 and 16 bar phrases with the oompas underneath the marching band without you even talking about it, about how like they start listening, they understand their function at the bottom of because it's real easy to understand that when you're in a jazz combo, and it's like it's you, right? And there's like a piano that's comping a little bit, and then there's like a couple of a couple of melodic instruments that are taking turns soloing. It's like your role is clearly defined at that point, right? Well, a marching band, not that the role is tricky, but it's maybe a little bit easier. It's not as obvious, is what I'm trying to say. What the role is, and that if you can teach a little bit of improv, that you then you stick them in marching band, and about how they start playing like bass players on sousaphones, and about how that was magical. So that's a really big topic that you asked about, Alan. That's just like a couple of thoughts. It doesn't answer the entire thing, but that's how it's used as a teaching tool, and certainly how it's helped me to do so much, both relating to improv and relating to just straight ahead playing as well. Tom Holtz, did he play any string or electric bass? He did as a kiddo, actually. And he actually made me swear, and of course I've got one right here, which this is a funny story. This used to be Lance's bass, and I bought it from him many years ago, like in a parking lot. It was like this sketchy transaction. It wasn't sketchy; it just looked sketchy. He was down here with his now ex-wife for a wedding, and anyway. We met up in a hotel parking lot, and I handed him some cash. At least I think I bought it from him. I don't think he gave it to me. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. The good news is he didn't listen to Brass Junkies when he was on it, and he's not going to listen now either. Sometimes I like to ask him about what he thought about a guest when I know he didn't listen, and then he just says, "I thought that was your best one yet." It's like his canned response, which is funny. Sam made me promise that I would not ever pick up the electric bass, because he said that how easy it is physically and also just brain wise, like constructing bass lines compared to tuba. He said it's gonna piss you off, Hits. You gotta promise me you're never gonna pick up the electric bass because it's insanely easy compared to what you try to do on the tuba. So, which I thought was funny. So yes, he did. He did play some string electric bass back in the day, Tom. And I know that Tom mentioned that he talked to him about it, in the halls of ASU, way back in the day. Okay, Ryan Schultz. Didn't Sam take us to an early traveling light gig in the Berkshires in '93? Stories like that would be fun. I don't remember specifically an early traveling light gig in the Berkshires in '93. I do remember a couple of trips. One was that Empire played with the Philadelphia Orchestra. They soloed with the Philadelphia Orchestra at Saratoga Performing Arts Center, where the Philly Orchestra, along with the Mann Music Center, outside of Philly, that they have performed at SPAC for many years now. And I do remember that my parents actually took myself and buddy Jason Gamer and a couple of other people, that we went to that, and then we got to go backstage, and that was incredible, getting to see the Philadelphia Orchestra and getting to see Sam out front, and Sam was introducing us to some of the players, etc. That was a really cool memory. And I also remember my dad and I went to a gig, and I think there might have been some other students there as well. But my dad took me to a bed and breakfast in the Berkshires sometime during my time as a student there. So it was early '90s. And it was way out there, esoteric, free jazz, which I love that. When that music is done really poorly, well, when Baroque music is done really poorly, when Baroque music is done really well, I don't necessarily enjoy it that much, but I digress. This is not like unique to esoteric, free jazz, but when that's done poorly, I get bored real fast. When that's like incredible people having a fascinating conversation, I can listen to that for longer than most versions of classical music. But this was like, turn the mouthpiece around, put it back on, like humming into the mouthpiece through the horn. Like, it was nuts. I remember my dad was knocked out because at the first break, which was like, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes in, Sam like welcomed everybody. And it was a good crowd. Welcomed everybody. This totally chill, like serene, like just gorgeous country setting in the middle of the Berkshires. And he was introducing the band, and I don't remember which one. There was 3 or 4 of them, and one of the guys, he didn't even know their name. Like, he had never met the dude until, he met him, like shook his hand, but he had forgotten. I remember my dad was like, "Wow, he didn't know that musicians could be like, playing on that level when they had like never met, to the point where he didn't even know the dude's name." So that was just like a couple of of trips that I remember from early. And I'm trying to think of the first time I saw Traveling Light. I actually don't know when the first time I saw them was. It must have been sometime around then. I think it was in the Boston area, though. I think that I went with my parents. The following summer, the summer of '94, the summer after I was done as a student, I worked for Sam that summer, and Sam, I was packing up his house, babysitting for Alex, who's now like almost 40, which is nuts. When the people that you used to babysit are turning 40, it means you are getting old. I was helping Diane and Alex. I was helping Diane pack up the house and his apartment that starred in that episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood back when Empire was on back in the '80s. But I was supposed to drive the moving truck to Arizona, but I ended up getting called to do a tour of Japan, so he let me out of that. But anyway, I remember that after the house was empty, like the house was completely, like the house had been packed up and moved, because Sam was the orchestra manager that summer at the Boston University Tanglewood Institute. By the way, shout out to all of all the students, brass students at BUTI this summer. I just did a couple of master classes for the students in both the wind ensemble and the orchestra, just a few days at Tanglewood, and thank you to Jupiter XO for helping to make my appearance possible, and to Ben Vasco for the invitation. But he had this orchestra managing gig, and then he was like getting on a plane and then flew right to Arizona, and then like the school year started. So his stuff left before he did, and so his house was empty. It was eerie. It was just like, it was empty. And Sam and Frank Vignola, Travel and Light, they actually recorded the Travel and Light play along album was recorded in the empty basement. I mean, empty basement. There was like two folding chairs and a music stand, and like a folding table which the recording equipment was on. And I actually ran the machines for that. I just hit record and stop, and I was just like 3 feet away from Frank and Sam laying those tracks down, which was really, really cool. So that's just another memory I have from the summer of '94. That was recorded in August, when Sam was still there, but Sam's stuff and family were no longer there. All right, the last question was from Marcos LeBlanc via Instagram. And what's one way you could describe him as a person that you could also say about his playing? And this harkens back to an earlier answer, but I thought that they were enough of a different question that I would include this one as well. And I think that the word that I would describe him as a person, as well as his playing, was present. Right? I was talking earlier about like being where his feet were, and about how that was like the secret sauce for him as a teacher. I really like his playing. Just commanded attention. If you and this shines through on all of the Empire Brass recordings as well. If you ever had the privilege of seeing him play with Empire, which I did for just countless hours rehearsing and performing, I'm just so incredibly lucky. His playing just commanded attention from the other players and from everybody in the audience. And in a way that was appropriate for the role that he needed to be filling in that moment. And so the point being that he wasn't commanding extra attention, unnecessary attention, just because he wasn't playing the melody, but it was just like he would play bass lines in Empire, whether we're talking like on the jazz, pop stuff, or on the classical stuff, but he played that in a way that helped to shape the line above it that he was following, yet also leading. It was just like this presence about him, the articulation, the tone, the musical storytelling, as he would talk about Fish, all of that stuff. And that was also the same way that he was as a person. After that gig with me, he was a presence that like left me positive that I could go change the world. And I ended up only becoming a podcaster, but hey, whatever. He gave me the opportunity. But in all seriousness, I think that that's it. It's just that his playing and his personality, that he was a real presence when you knew that he was in the room, because he kind of made everybody, and that's why he was such a good producer as well. He raised everybody's game, whether that was musically or not. He raised everybody's game when he was in the room with his tuba, when he was in the room without his tuba. And so I think that was like the perfect question to end on. Thank you to all of you. Thank you so much to the Patreon patrons who have been really patient with me this summer. If you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies. I appreciate all of you so much. It's a lot of work putting this thing out, and I love it. I'm really I'm humbled by the platform that myself and Lance built, and that I am continuing on with. But it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of money, and just the people who have supported it. Whether we are talking about Parker Mouthpieces or Duquesne or Houghton Horns, and there's been others through the years, but also the Patreon patrons and the people who just comment, share it with friends, subscribe, leave a rating and a review. Thank you to all of the people, starting with Matt and then going all the way down, to Marcos. Thank you very much to all of you. For taking the time to leave a question to help this episode become a reality. And I really enjoyed getting to reminisce about this, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And that's going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies.